Joining me now, a former general manager of both the New Orleans Saints and Miami Dolphins, Randy Meuller. Thanks for taking the time.
Good to be with you, Kayla.
Well, first of all, you wrote in a recent article for Fox Sports that any good general manager can read the tea leaves. So when it comes down to it, this shouldn't be a surprise what's happening with Julio Jones right now, and specifically the Falcons.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think everybody knows the cap ramifications that teams are having to deal with now. And I think when Terry Fontenot, their first year and new GM, sat down with the media around the draft time, he kind of laid it out that it was going to be a tough decision. So I think once other GMs and other teams heard that they were going to be looking to Julio to free up some money, I think everybody knew that the sand was dripping through the hourglass. And at some point it was going to come to fruition. And June 1 is the magic date in the NFL where these teams can make moves and push cap off into next year. So everybody's kind of just waiting to see what happens June 1 with Julio.
Yeah, and that's why it's really starting to heat up. And when it comes to a trade, Randy, what can the Falcons realistically get for Jones? Look, he's a true talent. He can still play, but he is getting older. He has recently dealt with some injuries.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the other part of it is you're talking about teams that have to have the cap room to take it on. So I think when I found out he would be available, and I keep thinking the price is going down every day, I went back and looked at some film myself just to see what teams would be getting. And you're correct. He can still play. All the skills are still there. Yeah, he's 32. He missed some time last year, but his numbers are unbelievable. And it's a big gap that teams could use to fill in with for sure. But having said that, he comes with a $15 million cap salary. And so they're going to have a lot of room to take that on. And there are a lot of teams that might have the need. I know Tennessee in particular is who you're thinking about, but their cap situation may, not be a great fit for him. So there's cap room, there's the need of the position. And then there's just the fact that I think a lot of NFL evaluators have found ways to find receivers and fill in other ways. So I don't know that they're willing to competitively give up the compensation that maybe some think they would have to get a guy like Julio.
You had mentioned like they might potentially think they could get a first round, and you're saying no. I mean, I would say second round at best in terms of picks.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's been said that they've been asking a first round, and I guess they can ask for one as long as the other side, all they can say is no, right? But I think they're going to have to get real at some point, and I think the first round pick is a pipe dream. I think they would be ecstatic, Kayla, to get a second round pick for Julio, and that's not to say that's not what he's worth. He's worth more than that, but the timing and everything else involved, it's going to make it hard to recoup a first round pick. They may end up at the end of the day having to settle for a third round pick, to be honest with you. It's just discount this time of year. It's hard to give a lot for that kind of a cap number and a guy that's 32 years old.
So in your article, you had mentioned the two best landing spots in terms of your opinion for Julio Jones, and you suggested the New England Patriots, the LA Chargers. Yeah. So why is that, Randy? And we'll get to Tennessee in a minute.
I think the Falcons' preference would be to trade him to the AFC. I think that competitively makes the most sense for them. Hey, they don't want to get rid of Julio Jones. They're just in a really tough cap spot, so they have to make the best of a bad situation. I think the one thing that makes it easier for them is they know the alternatives, right? They know Calvin Ridley. They know some of the other receivers that they've have on their team that they can produce with, which makes it a little different than a Aaron Rodgers situation in Green Bay because they don't know what they have in Jordan Love. So I think this makes it easy if they can send him to an AFC team. I think that would be beneficial to the Falcons to at least lessen the blow that they're not going to have to play against this guy a ton, or he's going to keep them from doing something in the playoffs. So that makes the most sense to me. And yeah, I mean, to get Julio Jones for a third round pick kind of sounds Belichickian, right? Is that a word?
Yes.
Yeah.
You so made
that's
it
something.
Up.
Yeah, that's something that, I think people fear that may happen, but hey, you got to make a deal, and timing is half the battle.
So we're going to get into the Titans now. They're supposedly in the mix for Julio Jones. Players are even trying to lure him. But when it comes down to it, it's got to work out money-wise. And right now, they currently have $3.5 million in cap space. Do you see John Robinson doing something where maybe he's restructuring contracts to bring him here?
Well, I think it would be something to consider. That's for sure. I think with their need at receiver, it does make sense. I think it's kind of equivalent to shopping for Land Rover at a Saturn dealership, though. I mean, you got to have the budget to buy the Land Rover, right? And they don't necessarily have the budget. So he would be robbing Peter to pay Paul by creating some cap room, pushing it off into future years, or find a way to extend Julio Jones so that his cap number comes way down and they push some of the guarantees out, in future years. So cap counting is a game within itself. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's credit card versus cash. There's a lot of, options that teams can use to spread money out. I just don't know at the end of the day. I think it's going to be really hard for John Robinson to really consummate a deal. But I do think if he's in the middle of discussing this with anybody, it's a good thing, because you can always say no at the end of the deal, but you have no chance unless you're in the middle of the discussion. Hopefully for the Titans fans, the Titans are.
Well, yeah, and you had mentioned they need help at that wide receiver position. Look, I mean, they got rid of Corey Davis. Adam Humphries is gone, and you've got A.J. Brown. He can't do it all by himself. How much of a fit, let's put aside all the cap issues, but how much of a fit would Jones be, and how much of a benefit could he be to the Titans offense?
I think Julio Jones fits in 99% of the offenses in the league at his skill set. That's for sure. He's big, he's strong. He's a combination of A.J. Brown and Corey Davis. He has the skins on the wall. Obviously they signed Josh Reynolds, the kid from the Rams. So they've got an alternate option as well. And then they drafted a kid in the fourth round, the Fitzpatrick kid. Yep. So they have some options, but none of these options are Julio Jones. So I think that's what it comes down to is, do they want to go all in on a guy like Julio to kind of make that window open right now for a Super Bowl, or do they want to build it slowly? And you're right. They've had an exodus of talent out of Tennessee this year. They've at some point got to put their finger in a dike and start adding to it. Maybe Julio is the first step, but there's a lot of what ifs in everything we're talking about. And so who knows how realistic it is.
Well, it's funny that you say realistic, because there's been a lot of big name players who have been tied to Tennessee in the past couple of years. I mean, they were supposedly in the mix for Tom Brady. They got Jadeveon Clowney. They got Bud Dupree. They were supposedly in the mix for J.J. Watt. Is Tennessee becoming a premier spot for some of these talents, these stars, looking at this place and saying, wow, I mean, I could see myself going and playing there?
Yeah, I think you're right. But I think the key maybe is Nashville itself, right? That's the hotbed. That's where these guys want to live. It's where they want to raise families. I mean, that's a credit to the area. People are fortunate to live there, and everybody seems to like it. And that word travels fast in NFL circles. So it's becoming a hot spot for players, that's for sure. So they want to be there. It's kind of the place to be, which is a nice thing if you're running the Titans, and if you can take advantage of some of that that's out there.
So before we go, I've got to ask you your gut feeling. Where's Julio going?
Oh boy, I think I'll say this, and we've talked about all AFC teams, but don't discount the 49ers. Okay. They are willing to find a way, it seems like, to push money, to move things around. I think they would love to have him. And I think New England is lurking. New England's always looking for bargains. If they end up with this kid for a third-round pick, I mean, we'll all roll our eyes and say, wow, there we go again, Bill Belichick. So I think it comes down to those two teams. I really do. I had mentioned the Chargers in my column, but I don't know that they have the deal-making ability to go make a deal that would go against everything they've done in the past. So I think you might be looking at a 49ers versus Patriots bidding war for Julio Jones.
Well, we appreciate all the great insight, Randy. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Kayla.